Good morning, everyone. Microphone check, screen check. Looks like everything's working correctly here. Yeah. Starting today off a little bit on the rough side. I dumped an entire drink on my keyboard this morning at like 4 in the morning. That's fun. So I kind of had the morning brief run into an abrupt stop. Luckily, it was at the end, and all I had to do was mostly mouse-based. But it's been a little bit of a weird one. So if you see anything weird happening, or if my mouse my keyboard starts going crazy and typing stuff, it's actually probably not my cat this time. It's probably just my fault. So. But with that out of the way, hopefully everyone had a great weekend. Hopefully you are all rested up and ready to rock and roll and all that fun stuff. As always, before we jump in on the left side of the screen there, very important to go through and understand everything that is inside the Live Trader Morning Prep PDF. Make sure to spend some time and read through that. I just wanted to take a second to give a shout out to our latest members who joined overnight and over the weekend. Thank you so much for the support. I'm super pumped to have you on board with the YouTube family and the SSFTG family. If you aren't part of the SSFTG family and haven't joined as part of the YouTube family or anything like that, check out the join button below the stream to gain access before our next private webinar. Get access to the Discord chat and to get that awesome badge next to your name here on YouTube to show your support. If you're trying to figure out what it is exactly that we're doing here, look no further than the Day Trading Academy. You can find that over on SSFTG. It comes packed with 19 plus hours of material loaded for you, and that doesn't include the hundreds of hours of live content that we've got going on YouTube and everything else. Please keep in mind, while that's in mind, the YouTube broadcast side of things does have between a 3 to 30 second delay, depending on where you're logging in from. But if you want to level up to the VIP status, you can enjoy exclusive permanent access to our non-delayed live analysis stream room that's over on Zoom Direct, as well as monthly VIP webinars, which we actually just had one this past weekend, private VIP events, one-on-one scheduling access, all kinds of cool stuff. So whether you're here and you're totally new or you're a veteran over on the VIP stream, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here with me today. And yeah, let's take a look at some charts, take a look at some news, see what's going on as we come in from the weekend. Don't forget to grab your morning DP levels. Those are posted for you there earlier this morning. Luckily, I got those posted before everything fell apart on me, but don't forget to grab those. If we look across the board here and kind of see what's going on, we've got the NASDAQ first off, which is, I mean, this thing's a mess, right? If we look at the overall bigger picture here, from top to bottom, then bottom to top, and then top to bottom, and I mean, this thing's just rip-roaring all over the place. But realistically, this is only a 15-minute perspective. A lot of times when you see this back and forth, this is nothing more than a larger scale accumulation zone. Could be buyers, could be sellers. That's where you can look at the volume to kind of discern what's going on there. But as it stands, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that they're probably buyers on the lows, This is a pretty good trend to the upside. So the fact that every time, what I want to be looking at is the lows, every time it dipped underneath there, it really struggled to keep going. I mean, it barely could, and then went screaming back above the highs. Dove all the way. I mean, this thing went skydiving straight into the ground and couldn't even break the low. And then rolled up, higher low, and then by this point, it was already screaming all the way up into the highs, and it led into the weekend. So very likely, a lot of traders might have even missed this entire rally up, or a good portion of it, because that really didn't start until like 9:30, right at the open. And well, before that, it was doing nothing. If you remember, we were looking at the chart like, what happened? Well, that's a lot of people might have left. And then they miss this whole thing. Oh, well. So with this giant rally to the upside, buyers are going to be looking for a reason to find a dip. I was thinking L1, and honestly, on Sunday and a little bit into this morning, they were showing some support off L1s, but they did end up sliding a bit lower. That makes sense, given, again, it didn't make a lower low, but man, did it come close, and went screaming all the way back up. And that's going to be an L5. L5s typically like bouncing more so off L2s, but the L1s were showing support. Now that we've slid through, I think it's pretty clear to see what happened here. They did end up getting back down to the L2, and now we're showing some decent support. Falling resistance still has to get out of the way, which it's getting really close to it. So a breakout pullback scenario going into the open would be, that would be the nice point for buyers to try to get this thing going further. We'll see. So far, the L2 is looking pretty solid. Over on the S&P, They are maintaining the L1 and continuing to maintain that L1. Creep this forward so it's not all the way across the screen. So as far as the drive to the downside, they had a big leg lower. Same thing. Saw that giant rally to the upside. It started petering out a little bit, tanked all the way down, but could not break a new low. Higher low, screaming back to the upside. Now, in this case, the buyers are actually holding the L1 so far, and that is not your typical scenario. Again, when you're holding or bouncing off of an L5, usually the following move is a bit deeper, right? It's a really deep pullback. The next one is usually a bit deeper too, like L2, L3. In this case, we've got an L5 into an L1. If that does break higher, that demonstrates a significant amount of strength. So that's something that we need to be paying attention to as well. So far, it's looking pretty good, though. Over on gold, gold, you're a fun one, huh? So the overall POC on this move down was a point of interest that is really kind of standing out because this drive from the top to the bottom, notice where this volume is drawn. I had to draw it over here because it wouldn't let me draw it. Good old Ninja bugging my volume. But either way, I did have to draw it to this point, so it does include these candles, unfortunately. So I don't know where that POC showed up because I can't look at it. My data is bugged and it won't show up. But what I do know is that the POC was here after they had some time and they went into the end of the day, going into the weekend with their average hovering around 77.5. Now, the reason that's interesting and why I left it there is because if we creep this forward just a little bit and we bump that over here, we can see the POC stays the same, assuming that the longs are still long, right? This is the big webinar that we had this past weekend talking about the assumptions here. And they're continuing. Uh-oh. Now, look what happened, right? The POC was at 77.5, 77.4. It didn't change much at all. But look at the context, right? If buyers were long and they were trying to get this to rotate back up, it just went underneath their break-even point, trying to go back up again. Then it slid all the way back down to a new low. This thing needs to reverse now. Because if we look at their average, where are they built in at? They're built in right there at around 77. Accumulation volume, starting from about the middle. So the primary objective for them is going to be at least back up into the 86s. But if it starts breaking back below 77, that's going to cause a bit of concern, and that would be potential rotation back to the downside again. We're on a little bit of a tippy scale here. Over on crude oil. Crude oil holding the L2 all the way down to a missed low. Lovely. So they did hold the L2, but unfortunately for a lot of sellers, if they were utilizing the low closes, which is always a good idea as far as objectives go, the low close objectives were filled. But the new lows or low tests, those were not. And if this does start rotating higher, you can feel that tension. If sellers were looking for their objectives to the downside, right? Maybe their targets, they just kind of threw it on there really quick and then had to run an errand. They come back and they realize their targets got missed by 4 ticks, right? We've all been there before. We know how that works, right? Well, what do you think they're going to do? They see this giant bull bar to the upside. There's going to be a little bit of nervousness. Like, wait a minute, wait, no, come back. You just missed my target, and now it's all the way almost back up towards break even, or I've given up, a quarter or a half of my profits. They're not happy about this. So that means that if they close out a really strong bull bar, the anticipation is that it's going to drive a bit further. More sellers are going to start jumping ship on paranoia that it's going to basically completely reverse on a miss on that low. And that creates kind of a cascading event where it just starts steamrolling higher. Really going to have to see how they want to play this. Interesting that they missed that low, though. Wow. Over on the euro, continuing to pull back. The previous pullback leg that we had created a very low-sided POC. Hang on one second. I can turn my heat on. This Michigan weather isn't okay. I'm over this. We've got the low-weighted POC 1.201, and I mean realistically, I don't know why my drawing. Oh, I know why. my DPs aren't going to be correct because I had to stop everything I was doing after I dumped my drink in my keyboard. That's why they're not right. Maybe we can go back and fix that. But either way, they created a low-weighted POC at 2021. So if those longs are in, they were definitely given their objectives to the upside, regardless of if they were looking at a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1. I mean, this thing looks like it went probably all the way up to a 5-to-1. So realistically, any buyers who were in here have been very handsomely rewarded. If it pulls back, you'll likely see some support here, probably more so a little bit further above it. But realistically now, because they've been given their objectives, we kind of have to start a new story. So if we go from the bottom to the top and see what's going on here, the assumptions, right? The assumptions. I would assume that these were shorts building up their volume at around 207. That could also be buyers taking profit near the highs, regardless of the reason. They're sell orders. It doesn't matter why. The POC built up here. So I have to assume that based on the information we have right now, that those were shorts and they got dumped on. Where would they love to come back to? Right about there, I would say, or at least in that area. They're backfilling some of this VVP action. If we draw this forward just a bit further, we can see that they have top-weighted their POC. That is a huge piece of information. Especially if you were in over the weekend or you watched the recording, you know what that means. That's a big deal. So when we start coming back down to this area, it doesn't have to stop there. There's nothing saying that this market needs to stay up if it cracks through that. Give me 1 second here. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So this is going to be a pretty interesting area on the euro, seeing as it's continuing to drive a little bit lower. If we see lower highs and perpetual failures from the buyers in that 207, it could be a pretty big clue that it's going to want to keep dropping. Over on the Bitcoin side of things, we obviously have a gargantuan rally back to the upside. Phenomenal BTFD scenario over the weekend. Now we have buyers continuing the rally to the upside, and a lot of shorts are probably getting wiped out, right? Remember, these do have shortable variations, whether it's leveraged on crypto exchanges or now on the future side of things. Either way, there are a lot of shorts who were probably looking for this to continue lower going over the weekend, and that didn't work out so well, seeing as they got dumpstered on that move back to the upside. So a lot of shorts who were looking for a bit of continuation, well, they were not given that continuation, and we see a big rally back to the upside. I don't like drawing the volume on Coinbase because it's not the dominant volume where it's traded, so we'll look at TradingView here in a second, but the overall anticipation is that Bitcoin continues to go higher from here. Same thing goes on with Ethereum. A huge amount of support at 2050, obviously. Big old bounce off of that and went into a small little wedge, and we can see this is where, because remember, there are Ethereum, not options, but Ethereum futures, and there are a lot of ways to short this one. Excuse me, jeez. There are a lot of ways to short this one too. As far as the overall movement to the downside goes, we've got this nice little wedge that's forming, and they tried breaking above the highs. Nice breakout pullback. That was the key, higher low, all the way across, and went screaming back to the upside. Now, this is what I want to see in this area, because realistically, we've got this drive to the downside, and they came all the way back up in, hit the L1, couldn't get anything done, right? Broke above it. Those L1 sellers were given a chance to get out of break even, but the sellers kept trying until right there where everything changed. So effectively, sellers who were looking for a continuation move down right there got just obliterated on the way back up. And a lot of them would love to get out if they can get a quick little flush back down towards those 2300s. Again, we'll have to kind of reconfirm volume on TradingView because I like Binance volume a little bit more. I find it, well, that's where the majority of the volume is traded, so we've got to have to go off that a little bit. In 1 second, I got to reload everything. What? All right, give this all a second to go here. All right. TradingView. Come here. Man alive, just come over here. There we go. So as far as the different markets that are going on, a few of them, again, in terms of the volume trading aspect, we've got this gigantic move going, and we can see on this continued move lower, sellers built all the way down to potentially around those 50,000, right? Let's be real. That's a psychological level, 50K right in the middle. And now that we've broken so aggressively above it, I'm kind of curious, what does this move to the upside demonstrate? What kind of volume are we showing on this massive rally? Big top-weighted volume, right back at around 500-ish. I mean, so much so that they've actually built a POC up at the top. So as far as the... Oh, my numlock was off. As far as the overall movement goes, this is kind of the balance point. It's not that the market can't go higher, but this is giving us a little bit of a clue that a deeper pullback is going to be a bit more likely. So short-term buyers are going to be looking to take profit into this with the assumption that it'll dip a little bit further. But as we're squeezing into Monday and a lot of shorts are potentially stuck, that could also be the fuel of the fire to see this thing go all the way up to 60K today. I mean, it's crypto. You never know. So that's kind of the mentality right now, is that shorts are definitely on the back foot, and they are having a very hard time, and likely stuck at around the 50,000 mark. Not much of a surprise there. If we look at Ethereum, and we go back at the overall Ethereum move, first off, we can see on this massive drive to the downside, it was accumulated the whole way down. So much so that they built a POC on the bottom before any of this other congestion. But if we go all the way to the end on this higher low, that final kind of trap before the juke up, we can see that the majority of buyers built their average around 2280s. So any pullback from 2280 on up to, I mean, really like the 2350s is going to be a zone of potential viable pullback for buyers to try to kick it back up again. That's at least a zone of interest. Now, if we look from the bottom, and this is what makes it so awkward, because technically the bottom was over here, right? I mean, the breakout move obviously happened right there, which is where I'm going to start it, but the volume is a little bit awkward in this case. Got a slightly higher built, but price is currently above it. So short-term support zone is going to be around like 2450s, 60s, to see if buyers can prop the market back up for another continuation. Be interesting to see what they can accomplish. All right, looking at the NASDAQ on the larger picture. First off, we do have a very obvious L1 hold. That L1 just, I mean, absolutely phenomenal bounces off of L1. And in terms of the movement down, I think they did technically close underneath it on the bear bar. It immediately rejected back up. Came back, it allowed those shorts out at break even who tried taking it short, and then reversed back up. So the anticipation for today is continuation, at least back up to the high closes, preferably all-time highs, which I think that should be feasible. It's also back up to 14,000, big psychological level. It's kind of what everybody's waiting for anyway. So continuation to the upside, meaning that dips today are going to be on the much more interesting side if they can get it done. That previous leg lower that did leave a POC shifted back at around 13,215-ish to 212. So if the market does want to pull back, and L3 is lining up with that fairly decent right now. Not much else going on, though. On the 60-minute, we've obviously got this massive continuation to the upside, but let me clean this up, and we'll start fresh. I need more days of data on this bad boy. 35. Let's do 90. There we go. There we go. All right. So as far as the nearer term, and that gives us some flexibility if you've got to go backward, the obvious major thing that's going on, like we've been talking about, is this huge rally to the upside. Buyers are likely buying low. But this is where we can see, does the volume actually prove that? We had this last move down, that previous leg lower, and they built their POC kind of in the middle. So that was a little bit of an awkward one. When they made a new high, rolled all the way back down to a new low, and we kind of contested those same areas, and we kind of continue this back across, we can see if there's any emphasis on either side here. POC smack in the middle, which makes sense because it's a very nice distribution on the bottom. Buyers are buying low, no surprise. You see that in the accumulation. And it's a really funky volume at the top, which would potentially suggest that sellers do want to sell at the highs, but it's more likely buyers taking profit. We don't have any consistent build. There's no nice, it's just jerky kind of icebergs inside there. So the waters are a little bit rough at the highs, and that would make sense. 14K in the middle. So if we can make it back up there today, we'll probably be jerking around 14,000 for a while. We see that in the volume. Points of interest in terms of where it will probably bounce between, if we're doing a bit of forecasting. Likely, the low side of that range will be around the 13,940s, after it's gone up here, of course. And the high side of that range will be somewhere inside the 1420s to potentially wherever they build up at the highs. But the low side will likely be hovering around these VVPs, one of them at least. If we narrow this volume in just a little bit further, there was this big drive down. Remember that big drive down that missed the low? I kind of want to see what happened on that move down. Uh-oh. Way high-weighted POC. So sellers, if those were sellers there, they were handsomely rewarded with that drive to the downside. And if those were buyers, they got absolutely annihilated. There's just no remorse all the way down. Now we can see that there was a whole lot of built-up volume down here, but they could not shift the POC. If we continue this a little bit further, once the buyers had some time to figure out what in the heck just happened to their accounts, then they had a chance to downshift the POC, and guess where? 750. Whoa! What a shock. It's almost like that level's like a bad rash. It just keeps coming back. We keep coming back to the 750 area. Fortunately, this time around it was short-lived. Went screaming all the way back to the upside, and now we have somewhat of a flag. Looking pretty strong, right? We knew that the buyers were stuck up here. They drove down. They had time to reaccumulate down at the lows, so much so that they positioned themselves at the base, and now they have been handsomely rewarded for that repositioning. They did their job correctly and they were paid for it, right? That's how this one kind of worked out. So as far as this story goes, that story's kind of done, right? I mean, we can keep the story going, but we know that a lot of buyers, likely as we approach these highs, we're just going to see decreasing volume, or at least that would be the assumption. So I'll measure from the lows, not including that big bear bar. And as the market's rolling up, we can see they shifted their POC right there. Rotten buggers. Then we have decreasing, a little bit of a bump higher, and then decreasing again. So generally speaking, we've got profit taking until we ran into right about here. From there, sellers began accumulating. Their average, which we will find out in just a second as we creep it forward here, is a little bit further up. But they have not been able to overtake the POC. Talk about just by a hair, huh? So honestly, the way that this looks is if we get this market to roll up into the open and they hit this volume cluster and it builds the POC, they top shift the POC and it shows resistance here, that's a potential really big problem for them to slide back down towards those 70s. So we've got to see these buyers show up to the party here if they're going to keep this thing going. But let's look at the overall, that move down, just the move down. I mean, we're stuck. We're right on top of it. And look at how they're playing off of it, too. This adds so much more emphasis. They close directly on top of it. That's a clue. This is a 60-minute chart, right? They opened on top of it, obviously, because they closed on it, went higher, came back down. They closed underneath it. The next candle treated it as resistance. Then resistance again. Then resistance again for 3 hours after it closed underneath it. Then it closed above it. Right? Acted as support only one time. I mean, that was the only time it came back. Before it ended up chopping down, acted as resistance. Now, you better believe I am very curious what happens in the next 34 minutes. I want to see, where does this thing close? Do we close above this? If we do, I'm going to be interested on that pullback. Zone of interest hovering around the 13,925s. From the 15-minute perspective, if we look at the overall volume, again, we already know that dive down. They got stuck from down there. Right on top of that POC. But if we increase this a little bit further to that higher low, we've got a low-weighted POC on the 15-minute at 750, and that's where they took over and kick the market back up. So as far as objectives to the upside, I want to see, have they been completed? Obviously they have been, but how far have they been? Jeez, this thing went up to like a 5-to-1. So bulls are more than happy, meaning that this next pullback doesn't necessarily have to be an L1. It could be an L2. It could even go down again, down to an L3. There's no necessity that this has to turn on an L2, which means that we don't need to be the first ones to the party. I'd much rather wait for the next pullback. Probably means that it's going to go screaming higher now that I've said that, but 928 right around the corner. That's the first big kind of time frame that we've got going into the open. For me, the big cryptos that I was personally looking at on that dip. Hold on. I gotta log back in again. Hang on. Well, I was going to say I'll tell you in a second, but got to go through like 7 million authenticators to log into crypto stuff. So hold on. So the ones that I was picking up yesterday, I dipped about 30% into Bitcoin. That was a pretty big one. I wasn't a huge fan of Ethereum because I couldn't pierce a new low. I'm a bit more vindictive in that case. I like new lows to buy into. Litecoin was another one that I picked up a bit of, but that was only maybe a 15% position. EOS was another one that was about a 15% position. Stellar was another one. That was closer to 18. I liked it a bit more. And then Link was another one. And Tron was another one. Tron was on the light side, though. I mean, Tron got annihilated. So the concern, obviously, is that this next move up is going to be more of a break-even push. But if they can break back above, then they should be good on Tron. I just didn't feel it was worth the risk, though. So I kept the risk more on Link, Stellar, EOS, Litecoin, Bitcoin. 1 minute until the open. Look at where they came back to. And do you see this? For those of you that were on the webinar on Saturday, you see something that, geez, oh Pete, just like it's stuff like this, you know. Makes me wish I traded Sunday night. Jeez. All right, well, that's kind of done, huh? 15 seconds or so until the open, right around the corner here. Let's creep this a little bit closer, see what's going on. From the highs, we've got the L4 reversal, which did hold in L1, L1, attempted L1, which totally failed, and now we have a massive reversal up. So they are back through the Euro session highs. If we look at the overall move, the Asian and Euro session are stacked. So generally speaking, the importance lies more so on where they hold the Euro session and where they dominate the side. Meaning that if they stay above the Euro session highs, then generally they stay up for the rest of the day after the morning is done. If they stay underneath it, then we'll probably see them go back down to the other end. It's usually the case when Asian and Euro sessions are stacked. They kind of pick a direction. You can think of this as the accumulation and stagnation before the move. And it appears as though the first move attempted to go down and failed. So I am definitely on the bull side of things. Coming into today, just noting where we are on the bigger picture. Again, it's very, very high up here. So by no means would I want to be a buyer way the heck up here. The only way that I would ever consider being a buyer up here is if I had a hedge or something to protect the potential downside, because the potential downside's definitely there right now. Not to say that this can't go screaming higher. We know how the NASDAQ works, but there's definitely causes for concern. Stock exchange is open. Market getting a little bit more of a continuation push to the upside. Bulls would love to see a pullback. Let's see what kind of POC we're dealing with. Ooh, 1875. Can we get a quick little flash dip down to 1875? That's right back at settlement. The VVP is at 14. If we look at the overall structural move from the lows, technically they gave up an L4, so an L1, or the top of an L2, like to the tick. Jeez. There's a lot of things that are lining up on this pullback here. Unfortunately, the pullback is inside the Euro session, which makes this a bit awkward. I would almost rather see this, just with that in mind, go much higher, so that the L1 or L2 or something is at the top of the Euro session instead of inside it. Starting to shift volume a little bit here. We're seeing the sellers trying to build up at around these 39.75s. They haven't shifted the POC yet. But look at the volume. Generally speaking, we're building accumulation. It's just it didn't work so well for them the first time around. See if they can get that dip back down to the 1875s. It is back inside the Euro session highs. Nice bounce. They do have a POC shift at 940. Look at the volume building up at 940. So now we know that sellers were originally short down from the 920s, but they've built their averages up. If these are shorts and they're in from 940, their objective is to try to roll this back down in towards like the 1875s. But it's very important now that we know that they rolled this POC. We want to see what they do. Do they end up getting stuck at their original entry point, or do we see it drive through? Obviously, that could be a shortable opportunity. I have a really hard time shorting this kind of thing, but doesn't mean it's not an opportunity. In this case, I would rather see them break back above 940, knowing that the sellers have shifted their POC higher and their average is in now profitable territory. I want to see that profitable territory get taken away from them again. Then you'll see them jump ship. Like, oh crap. I mean, put yourself in that mentality, right? You're short from here. Well, first off, the average would have been down here. So you're short from here, doesn't work, rips higher. You sell more going into a little bit further up. You've now built your position up a little bit further, right? So your average is here. The market's kind of hovering around. That one's wrong. Now you've built your POC up here. Your short is your average again. You're in the positive again, finally. The first time in a long time you've been in the positive. Do you think you're going to let it slide back above 940? I don't think so. Why aren't my hotkeys working? No! Did my hotkeys break when I dumped it all over my keyboard? No! Oh, no. Oh, man, that drink is getting very expensive now. Ugh. I don't know if you heard me slamming my keyboard. I was like, why isn't it working? Ugh. All right, well, I hope someone was able to at least utilize that for something. I was unfortunately unable to do so. My keyboard commands aren't working right after I dumped my drink on my keyboard this morning. I thought I was good to go. Hang on a second. I gotta check some stuff on my end. Nope. Cortex? I know it's one of these things. Or not. That's cool too. What about Synapse? Synapse. There we go. My keyboard still shows up on the list, so I know that part works. All right, so they're showing up there. NinjaTrader, you got my hotkeys? Order entry, yep. And isn't there an option that you have to turn on hotkeys? Did that get turned off? Use order entry hotkeys. That's checkmarked. Huh. So it should have worked, is what I'm seeing. I'll try it one more time if I can get another point of interest, but Nice bull bar back up. We've got the POC back up to the top shifted point of interest, but it's fairly obvious that the earlier sellers who were in jump ship in the 919s. Nothing. It sucks. No. All my shortcut commands. Now I do have to get a new keyboard. I thought I got lucky. Crap. All right. I have to do this the old-fashioned way. Oh, I'm not interested in selling anything right now. All right. So I'm going to have to keep a couple orders on screen because my shortcut commands don't work. Nice little bull bar there. I'd like to see if they can get a bounce back above and break through this 31 volume, because remember, they're still under the POC cluster right now. Let me shift it forward so you can see it. But we do know that they exited the majority of their position at 1875 or so. So if they start failing back above the 931, do you see the volume dump at 931? Get out the blow dryer. I'll stick it in a bag of rice. Time to mouse it. I know, right? Pleb. Who uses the mouse? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just so used to order shortcut commands. Just yeah, I don't blame you at all. Honestly, I think a lot of shorts are short. Their average is around 3931. If it breaks back above that 931 area, though, I wouldn't expect those sellers to stick around for very long. Sellers are still technically in short, though, and they're still winning the fight. These bull bars are not helping them. Everything rests on that POC. Remember, put yourself in their shoes. They've been short, wrong. Short again, wrong again. Short again. So far, kind of right. POC building down again. Look at the volume dumping on 931. Uh-oh, there it goes, right there. Now the shorts are underwater. I want to see a quick little snapback to that 930 area and see how they respond. It looks like they already jumped ship. There's the first dip. Secondary dip. I want to utilize this pullback as a zone for these earlier sellers to get out of their positions. First objectives back up to the highs, secondary objectives above that, and then tertiary if they can break above. They've built the POC down at 930, so I do have to see them break back above that 930, and if it does demonstrate resistance there, then that'll be a pretty big clue. But I think we've already kind of been handed our clue. But a little lower. There's a lot of resistance here. We'll drop it there. Oops, there we go. Just because that's right around that break-even point of that first objective. We're hovering in this zone, and I don't want to give much of this back given how this is acting. But if we can break above this Euro session highs, this is looking really good. Might even make a bit more sense, just given all the high closes and everything, to migrate it down just a bit to the 940s. Strong bear bar back down. I want to see what they do on this lift higher. Because they went back to the POC again. Right back to the POC. I'll take the objective there. I'm okay with that. A little more continuation. See if they can drive this bad boy to the upside. These shorts are stuck. Stop is further up. See if we can trail it. We know the NASDAQ. It'll probably vindict me out because that's the NASDAQ. Yep. taken out, but beautiful continuation back up on that reversal of volume. We still know, I mean, honestly, I think a lot of longs are still long. It's just, I know that I'm on the shorter end of the stick. I'm operating with a handicap until I get a new keyboard, so I'm not going to play on the risky side of the fence just to play it safe. But I do like this continuation back up. The majority for me out was at the Euro session highs, which is the anticipation. Because again, what happens at the Euro session highs is going to determine what's going to happen for the rest of the day, likely at least. Nice continuation breakout to the upside. Beauty. I'm very curious if we were to encompass, I usually don't go across the weekend like that, but if we were to encompass this entire leg down, that 750 volume wasn't enough to shift it away from 915. You can see what they did. I mean, it's just accumulated straight into the lows and then maybe bought a little more down there. Very nice continuation back to the upside, although I did want to see that go a little bit further down. They did get down into the L2. The first time, I mean, I tried buying it. That was when I found out my shortcut commands didn't work. Second time around, I wasn't going to let that opportunity slide again. Now they've shifted the POC to the upside. So what does that show? That demonstrates that if we do know, which given the volume was very obvious, that we had earlier sellers who got in here, they were stuck. Again, assumptions. They were short here. They got stuck again. They got re-short again with their POC way high weighted. They bounced off their original entry point. That adds even more proof that they were stuck shorts. Right? So that adds even more context that we know the shorts are stuck. So after it bounced there and started holding another higher low, I mean, geez. The shorts are out. The only thing that the sellers will have had, and they still have right now, is that the POC is top weighted again. So sellers are not done fighting. They are fighting tooth and nail to try to keep this thing down. And here again, look at where the price is and look at how price is responding to where the average is. It closes back underneath it, rejects it as resistance. Seems like sellers trying to re-add to their position short, doesn't it? Little nuances like that you pick up on, if you're trying to scalp at least. I'm still short. I still don't blame you. I like that little stint to the upside for the longs, but they really just kind of fell apart at the highs. I wasn't expecting it to go that high, personally. But you can see drastic profit taking just fell off the cliff once it went above the top. So you can see the majority of people exited around the Euro session highs. Someone got some icing on the cake, though. You'll add at 964. Yep. High closes. I mean, that's a perfectly logical area. Just be careful. You're getting close to all-time highs. You know, I know I don't have to tell you that. It's just... it's that parent in me. I can't help it. You other parents, you know. Don't touch that. That's hot. They know it's hot. You just gave Murphy a reason to impose his law. That's all. Anyway. Sellers back underneath 13,940, holding a little bit lower. Primary objective, I'm still very curious to see what they do at their original entry points. If they do end up breaking through it, we do have settlement, obviously. So it'll be a zone of contention. And that'll be important info if it just rips through it. Because then, obviously, their first point of interest is going to be where the market's going to want to try to target. Oh, you got on way early. Oh, yeah. You're good. All right, just kind of waiting so far. Crude oil had that giant bull bar, but it really proved much on the 15. If you look at the the follow through or complete lack thereof. Now, this might just be a big dip back for those sellers on that bear bar to get out of break evens, or some of these shorts down here, offering them a chance to get out before it rips their face off. Maybe. Nice bull response. If buyers take it above this, it's likely to keep going. You will have swing buyers above that as well. So from a swing perspective on crude, at least, let's see what the volume looks like just to make sure. I'll go down to the... Well, let's include this higher low here. Sure. Ugh, 61.80. But we can see they're not really going to need a whole lot more if they hover around here too much longer. So the POC might still be able to shift. And that would give buyers even more strength from the lows. Right now, though, we've kind of got to get through some of this falling resistance, some of this stuff in the way. It's pretty early to the party yet. Getting close. Getting close. Crypto continues to rally higher. Gotta love that. Now, again, remember, we were talking about what they want to do around that top-weighted POC. Look what they just did on Bitcoin, on the 15. You tell me, what are they doing? Doesn't look like shorts are winning a whole lot. Whoops. We've got 10 o'clock top of the hour around the corner, but there's no news. There's nothing to really worry about. So Dallas Fed at 10:30, I guess. For what it's worth. Go figure, Tron, the one that I went light on, is one of the better performers. Never fails. Link's up 9%, Litecoin's up 8.7, EOS is up 12.4. Doge is only up 8.6, huh? Slackers. Bcash is up 10%. Bitcoin's up 10.9. ADA's up 13.2. Back up to almost $1.25. Ripple, speaking of which, is also at around $1.25. That's nuts. You've got ADA and Ripple at the same price now. All right, breaking back through this 13,930 volume. That is incredibly important. If all of those buyers were trying to utilize that breakdown volume as a reason to go long, they just lost their reason to be long. I'm not long anymore, so there's nothing for me to do, but that is a huge concern. We haven't really even come back to the first 5, but I guess we'll look at what happened in the first 5. Oops. Oh, too far. $78.50 on the S&P. Oh no. 940. That doesn't help any of the buyers. Big dip back down, but notice what happened. Immediately shot underneath that break-even point. There are no sellers looking to get out there. They're like, nah, are you kidding me? Why would I ever get rid of my position? You think I'm nuts? Shorts are hoping that this thing comes back now. I was long. Obviously, I'm not a fan of reversing, but now we've broken back underneath and we've got more proof. If the market does come back to 930, that's where the rest of those longs are going to be looking to get out at break even. Downside objectives would be, first off, backfilling some of these VVPs. 910s are the first obvious ones. Secondary one, you've got another one at around 901. After that, their earlier short entries, remember where they were short from the original point. If we go backward, draw this back just a little bit up to this high. Their POC right there. That's the objective right now. 895. Covered one of the 3 shorts. Yep. Now we're in the next area in the 901s. Big drive to the downside. I feel so stupid. and closed at 52, feeling FOMO now. So there's whenever, for me, okay, everybody's different. For me, whenever I have a situation where I'm feeling FOMO or I got out a little bit early or something like that, if I'm looking at, okay, I want to get back in on this, I'm feeling FOMO, I really need to get back in on this, and I got to scratch the itch, I'll throw a really small amount on there, something that if I'm wrong, which usually happens with FOMO, then I don't have to get back a whole lot. So usually what I'll do is on the profit on the way up, I'll utilize that as my buffer. So that's what I'll use as my next entry. So if you made, $1,000 on the way up, then I would only trade the next trade with $1,000. You see what I'm saying? So you're kind of utilizing the same trade just to kind of further compound the long. But you're not adding any risk to the original trade. It's a way to re-enter without going, all the way down the rabbit hole again. Or make sure that you lock in some. So, like, as an example, again, if you made 1,000 on the way up, then use 800, right? Pay yourself 200 or whatever. I don't care how you do it, but at least that way you can scratch the itch, but it's not going to cost you anything extra on the original part of the trade. In fact, it's not going to cost you anything other than potentially losing the profit that you made on the first part, which would mean that Bitcoin would have to go to zero. So, Further downside objectives here. Buyers are definitely stuck right now. If they stayed long and they did not shift, they weren't given a chance to shift out of the market. We saw a lot of volume dumping around here. So there were some, obviously, traders that were picking up on it a bit early. But now that we're down through this 930, you can see they reached out. It was like the mountain climber falling off the side of the mountain, like, grab my hand. You remember Scary Movie? Grab my good hand. Jeez. Well, it didn't happen. He didn't want to grab for that hand and fell off the side of the house. And, well, now they're just hoping that they can climb their way back up again. That was back before politically correct was a thing. Top of the hour, around 6 minutes or so. Also curious to see what happens at their original entry points. They might utilize that as the buffer zone. Like if it starts breaking above that, why let it come all the way back to their break even? They'll reduce a bit more here. Immediately jump back above it. Yikes. How does the market respond to that? Closed above. Big wick underneath too. I don't think sellers are necessarily done, but this isn't helping them. Let's just go up to the highs. I want to see what they were up to, and them only. And then we can look at the leg down. Ooh, man, they almost built a POC down there at 904. Holy cow. They ended up building it at 1275. So if longs are buying into this, at the moment, those longs are profitable. It's good to know. We're also back above that original break-even point. Remember, this might be kind of that soft stop area where they're like, if it goes too much further up, maybe I'll reduce a bit. Now they're reducing. Volume coming in at the close. If they start triggering above that, we'll probably see a little bit more run. So buyers want that to happen, but sellers don't. And sellers right now potentially would be the ones that are stuck from 1275 if they're trying to get continuation. See if they can rotate back up to that earlier POC. Next drive back down 1275. We can see if they want to defend it. $10 o'clock is around the corner, although there's no news. Sometimes 10 o'clock will just move things anyway. So keep that in mind. wonder if I can just manually do my hotkeys. Ooh. 13,922 quarter. POC shifts down, acting as resistance initially. Sellers will be looking for continuation down. The assumption here is that the earlier buyers were long, and now they're potentially trying to exit a little bit. If these are shorts, they've averaged up just a bit further. So it's easier for them to maintain a profitable position at least. POC shifts down 13,922. 22.25, 22. They are building a ton of volume up here. Now it's starting to go through, though. Yeah, re-entering in at the same price where you exited, there's nothing wrong with that either. Just know that, you know, just with any potential limit entry, you might not get it. This is the earlier POC. How does the market respond to it? Assuming these were longs buying the pullback, shoots right back above it. I want to see this pull back to an active support. Watching this kind of cyanish line here at around 930. Even though the POC is a little bit lower at 22, scalpers will be at least looking for bounces off 30. I don't want it to go all the way back up, though. The 5-minute volume is not too much farther away anymore. Back up to the 5-minute volume high. Ooh, they didn't test it, though. Can they get the pullback? Hey, how's it going? 10 o'clock right around the corner. Let's see if 10 o'clock can do it. Not quite there yet. They just will not get that little dip back, which is very strong. I mean, that demonstrates a lot of strength to the upside. But that dip back is what I need. We're back above that previous point of interest at around 13,930. See if they can get a nice little dip back here. That's a heck of a bear bar off the top. Yikes. Now the question becomes, do you want to be the first one to the party with that kind of bear bar? I think I'd rather see how they close. Potential bears selling above the previous bear bar as well. A lot of it's coming off the back of this volume. Yeah, the S&P's creeping back up. And look at the 15-minute chart, too. The 15-minute, that last bear... Well, I guess you can call that a bear bar. Jeez. How much more proof do they need? I just want a quick little flush back down to that blue line. Not the 940s, the one below that. I might have to do it later. Now, if it drops really fast down into that area, that would actually be a zone of interest to be a buyer. More buying support coming off the 940s. It's not a surprise. It's the first 5-minute volume cluster. Oh, the POC shifted up to 940 now. Ooh. Okay. Let's see what they do with that. That is a ton of orders hitting at 940, though. I'm trying to use the indicator template. I don't know is what's wrong. Neither indicator nor templates are appearing. Could you please help during training? Yeah, for sure. What I'll do for the VIP room, since obviously it's going to show a few things internally, for training, stick around in the Zoom meeting. After I close the YouTube webinar, then we'll just do a VIP room for a quick Q&A to fix some of that. So after I say bye on the Zoom side, don't leave. 13,945, volume shifted up again. Now it shifted away from the first 5 minute. Wow. They shifted it from the first 5 POC too. 945 is like a brick wall right now. What is happening up there? There they go. Now they're through it. So shorts are perpetually stuck more and more and more and more. Man, what a wild move. So from top to bottom, look at that volume cluster they built down there. Holy cow. They did shift the POC down too. So it's just BTFD. The hot spot's going to be the 930s. So for a swing zone of interest, 930s. In that area. Now, when we're looking at the risk parameters here, the overall risk shouldn't be really able to go down to like the 8, much below the 18s. And the primary objective is to see this market rotate back up for a 2-to-1 off of that. So if we're using that... Puts my 2-to-1 to the tick at the highs. Oy. I gotta optimize a bit on that one. 51 quarter. There we go. Wasn't there a... Hang on. Oh, golly gee willikers, that... Man, what a wonderfully designed... what a wonderfully designed indicator. It works beautifully. Is there a way that I can change the opacity? The opacity is at 10. Oh, it goes from 1 to 10. Okay. 2? Why isn't it changing the opacity of these giant things on the screen? Okay. I don't understand. Okay, that's not something I can use. Jeez. Still waiting for the pullback. Not really much else going on. We know that the shorts have been finally slammed, and the buyers built that POC on that low move. That wasn't the case initially, right? On the first drive down before they made that higher low, the POC was actually up here in the 40s, which shifted back up. But just after those bull bars on the low, Sounds all right. See if they want to pull back. What? There we go. Now we just got to wait and see. The S&P obviously isn't helping because that continues to go higher. The market is really, really aggressively bullish. We do have some potential gapping that happened here on this last move. But on the 5-minute overall, let's see. Big candle gap. Which filled that objective. And now they're creating candle gapping right now. Not really much else is going on. S&P still chugging up at the highs. The euro, now the euro, still not even close to the pullback zone, but that 1.2021, I mean, if they can flush there today at some point, that would be an incredible long zone. I mean, I guess the big question would be, can they actually make that big of a move yet today? It's possible. I'll leave the order out there, just because I know I'm not going to be paying attention to the euro a whole lot. All right, S&P on this little dip. Now, the last time they triggered a bear bar, the thing flushed. So it hasn't really been very viable to be a buyer underneath the most recent bull bar. But if there are going to be buyers who are looking to scalp, they'll start looking at it around 83.25. I'm going to give it the assumption that, given the last time, sellers slid down pretty aggressively. If they trigger 83, I'll assume that they'll probably be able to get down to 81 for the shorts. So I would rather be a buyer at 81. That increases the probability a lot. Decreases the chance of actually getting filled, but, you know, there's always a trade-off. And the NASDAQ just does not want to pull back. All right, well, the entries don't change, but give it time to figure out what it wants to do before I throw the stops on, so I don't have to keep canceling them. Micro double bottom on the S&P. Typically speaking, when you get a strong bull double close like that with a micro inside double bottom, If it does come back, which is usually not very frequently, but if it does on the next one, it's usually a nice, strong, supportive bounce area for scalpers. More bullish continuation to the upside. The assumption is that at some point today, there will be a pullback to that zone at around 30. I don't know when it's going to happen, but what I'm looking for is all of the sellers who were trying to build in these shorts, and we know they were sellers because we saw how they moved, right? So knowing that they're sellers and knowing that they're stuck with an average position of around 930 and the market screamed above them, I want the market to come down and allow them to get out. But I need to see them come down and allow them to get out before I can take a swing long, because I need their fuel to my fire. A seller exiting is a buyer. Well, I'm looking for a very strong bounce out of that zone. Typically, you don't have to risk a whole lot for those bounces for the reward. A lot of times you get that quick bounce up. The objective is a 2-to-1, but these are the types of moves where if they do sustain, you can see those all-time high runs and runs that go on and on and on and on for 5-to-1, 7-to-1. I think we were looking at one over the weekend that was like all the way up to like a 10-to-1 or something stupid. They're crazy. So we'll see if it wants to come back. NASDAQ hasn't even touched the low of the previous bar. S&P, that micro double bottom. That's looking tasty. $83 quarter, $82 quarter, $81 quarter, any pullback? I have to force me not hitting the buy. Oh, for sure. I got to see a dip a little lower. That little micro double bottom, I mean, to be reasonable, you could also expect that they might try to dip down towards that 82 quarter if you were looking for like an initial entry adjustment type thing, because that was also where the bulls kind of kicked this move off to the upside after this bear flush. Ugh, top weighted POC on the S&P? Okay. There goes the NASDAQ again. Now the NASDAQ's pulling the S&P up. If they both start falling together, that's the concern that this could push this a little bit further down. I really like 83 quarter, but at this point now they're in tandem. So if they both start pulling back, that could create a bit more of a force drive. I would rather start at 82 quarter now. It makes more sense. I mean, I know you can't really see it on the 5-minute, but put this into perspective, right? The market went up to the highs, pulled all the way back down, went all the way back up, and then if it pulls all the way back down again, that'd be like a V bottom into a V top. Yikes. I do not want to buy too high on something like that. I want a quick flush down into the 30s. That's what I'm looking for. Volume from bottom to top so far has been, once again, accumulated. You think shorts would learn their lesson. Holy crap. Hang on. S&P made moves. Hang on. Jeez, oh Pete. What in the world was that? Well, I jumped ship real fast on the S&P. I don't know what in the heck happened, but that was a quick fill of every order I had sitting there. Lordy, lordy, lordy. Oh, this is a good thing I had the limit orders there, huh? What the heck was that? Someone just hit sell market on 700 contracts. Oops! And again, this was the concern. I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about. This type of movement down on the micro scaling would mean that it would likely slip further down. It happened extraordinarily fast, but that was the concern. Jeez, OP. S&P's moving faster than the NASDAQ. Was there any news or what? I mean, what happened? I didn't see anything. Might have just been the earlier sellers giving up. Like, maybe if we sell 1,000 contracts at the market, it'll be enough to get this thing to go down just a little bit. But what happens if that doesn't work? Ugh, NASDAQ. You went short at the right time. Nice job. Nice quick little snap back down. I mean, you could definitely tell you were not alone. They're building POCs up at the highs again. They just keep selling it. Every time it makes a new high. The POC's up here now, 51.25. I'm still waiting for the bigger pullback, but just goes to show. Never learn their lesson. Or they just have much larger positions to build into. That darn infinite money crowd. All right, well, we are going on to 10:30 right around the corner. So far this morning has been a really nice solid trading morning, and a quick little gift there from the S&P. I certainly wasn't expecting that. I wanted the bounce there, obviously, just not in that way. Wild how fast that went, but either way, it worked out pretty nicely. So overall, that'll do it. Looking at the bigger picture, again, the NASDAQ at some point today, I'm looking for the higher low pullback, and I'm assuming, or the assumption is, that this market will not stick around there very long. And what we can do, actually, just to see how well we pick up on, I don't know where it's going to turn around from, so I'll just draw it assuming that this is the high. But eventually, I want the market to pull back down into this low. We'll probably see something like this. And then a quick dive down. What I want to see is this. That's what I'm looking for. That's my goal. So what that means is if this starts sliding down too far, like this volume node's a very obvious zone that should be able to support the market. And if they start sliding much below that, it's game over. Right? The objective is up at the highs, which at that point would be roughly around 2-1. So that would be the breaks. And then looking on the euro, there it is. Looking on the euro, the objective for the euro, really what I would like to see here is probably something along the lines of this. And I would like to see it respond pretty aggressively. I don't want to stick around there very much, so I'll represent that by a small juke back and forth. Something like that. That's what I'm looking for in this scenario. Meaning that, again, this support cluster below should be able to support, and if it doesn't, not interested below. The nice thing is the objectives on this are incredibly high. The risk is very small underneath the lows, but the reward potentially is at least back to the first volume cluster, if not all the way back up to the POC. That's really all that's kind of sticking out right now. And the NASDAQ. Just one question, those moving averages on your chart, do you use them for trading or entries at all? No. They're more of a visual justification, is the best way to put it. I don't make trading decisions off of the moving averages at all. I know my last trade I was going long into them, so I know sometimes it looks like it. But that would be primarily just because it's an average. The market likes to revert to the mean. So if I'm buying a pullback, I should be buying around the average, right? So generally speaking, your averages should be around there, you know? If you're trying to be like a buy the pullback type trader, depending on the moving average. But no, I don't use them for entry decisions or anything like that. It's more of a visual aid so I can quickly look at markets. Because you got to remember, I especially on the weekends or anything like that, where people will ask me to, hey, take a look at this. Or what do you think about this? Or hey, what do you think about this? It's really easy for me to look at it and say, well, you know, just looking at it right now, it's obviously bullish. All the moving averages are up, right? It's like the Ichimoku cloud, right? You could utilize it that way too. That's kind of the way that I use it, honestly. It's just there's too much of the Ichimoku. It dominates the chart. So I honestly, I would prefer that over moving averages. It's just too much. So. Oh, don't pick up an order now. No. I need my spot in line here. Sorry if you said this earlier. What are your thoughts on Litecoin and BCH today? Well, Litecoin last night I bought into, so I was definitely interested on the Litecoin side of things. As far as the markets as a whole, the one big thing that stands out across the board on the crypto sphere, if we look at, well, Bcash is right here, so I guess I'll just start with this. Is that we've got this monster reversal back to the upside. And that's after a huge slide off. Now, what has the market really been waiting for? A lot of buyers like buying at value. And if we zoom out to something a little bit larger, let's look at like a 60-minute chart. Remember the values that we were talking about, those bigger dips? So if we look at the last big dip, that was from there to there, 47.23%. So value buyers want 47.23%. They still have not been given that, by the way. But you can see every time it's getting it's a little closer. They're really trying to creep it down there, but they just can't quite get it. So that makes me curious. Why are they having such a heck of a time here? You know, you'd think they'd be able to slide down and get value relatively easily, especially if they're in free fall. So what's going on here? Well, let's look back at this last leg. You know, what's in the way? Is something stopping it? Oh. Do you see? Do you see what I see? That's why there's support here. They can't quite make it down to value because value has justifiably been shifted higher. Cheap is now not as cheap as it should have been. And buyers are defending it. So realistically, it just seems like buyers are heavily defending their earlier points on a value pullback. It just so happens that the value pullback is a little bit further up than a lot of traders will have wanted. Now, if we look at this most recent drive down, the first move down, right, just the first drive down, their POC was smack in the middle. They tried buying the pullback, they got dumped on. Not really much of a shock there. When it came back to it, it responded very nicely. But as they continued back down to another new low, what do? Their POC is shifted a little bit lower, and they got dumped on. So before Bitcoin Cash can go further, and the reason why I chose not to take a long on Bcash was primarily because it's still a big distance underneath that previous volume node, and we haven't seen any volume shifting down here to suggest that the buyers have had enough strength to take it over. Now, it doesn't mean they can't, obviously. If we look in the nearer term, like this high to that low, we can see that it's definitely bottom weighted. So the short-term buyers are taking over. The long-term, though, they're still hanging out and they're underwater. You need to see them get back above. So in the short term, it's shifted. That's it so far on Bcash. Now, Litecoin, and the reason why I like Litecoin a little bit more, if we go over and look at the overall move, first off, it looks very similar, right? If you look at the formation that's been going on Bitcoin Cash and on Litecoin, they look very, very similar. So the big obvious thing, they trapped above the highs, dumped all the way back down to the lows. Yep, okay. Again, we ran into this big problem area where the market had some trouble. So let's look back. Were these guys able to at least get value? If we look on the price range from the top to the bottom, that was not the bottom. Let me creep that up a little bit. We'll just say 38%, whatever. So value buyers are looking for at least 38% off. Do you see why I like Litecoin just a touch more? Ring the bell. It's dinner time. Back the truck up. Very, very interested in Litecoin on that flush to the downside. It's not to say that they can't get a shift or anything like that. But in terms of the overall volume that's going on, if we look at the volume to the downside and take this drive from the top down to the new low, that POC was once again in the middle. I need to refine this. Can I save this as a template? Save as default. Apparently, I already have one named default. It just doesn't like to use that one, I guess. Okay. Let's creep this a little further forward. Okay, so this is actually really interesting information. We did have a very nice bounce off the lows, but it was not enough to shift the POC. That's definitely important information. That might mean that this has to stick around here for a while. If it does V-bottom straight out of here, the big thing that I need to see then is for them to shoot above that volume node and get a higher low bounce. Right? We got to get away from these sellers. So far, we're demonstrating incredible value pullbacks. So by no means am I looking to get out of the longs that I picked up. But if it dips lower, that's even more value as far as I'm concerned. So Litecoin is, well, not right now, but was in a big zone of interest. And if it dips back down again, it will continue to be in a zone of interest. Would you say we bottomed out? On Litecoin, it's a lot more likely. Even if it does make a new low, we already know that that's value. So I'm not expecting another new low to stick around very long. And in fact, if it does, I would be looking to buy more down there, personally. So I just don't see this going lower on Litecoin much further. And if they do, then the next likely objective is double down this 38%. So don't hold on to it, right? If it's going to start breaking back below this and we start cracking through 200, the 190s, I mean, if we start getting down in the 185s, 180s, I'm not going to want to stick around for too much longer because then this is where you start doubling down this value. Well, 38 and 38, that's more than I want to sit through. So I'm not interested in that. So if it starts breaking down through the lows, because I do want to stay net long on Litecoin, I would rather exit maybe like 50% of the position at a loss to look to re-enter lower down to see if I can just draw my average a bit further down. So DCA, definitely interested on Litecoin. Not so much on Bcash. Yet. Let's see here. Oh yeah. How would you compare your trading from now to before? What do you like more about the current, which pushed the change? That's a great question. In terms of the way that I trade now, the way that I'm entering, the way that I'm exiting versus any time as before, really hasn't changed much. I mean, I'm a scalper at heart, right? That's my thing. But aside from that, being focused now that we have such a huge influx of of volume from retail traders, from smaller volume traders, traders who are throwing on 1 micro at a time, right? It's more of the smaller traders. It's not so dominated by Goldman and JP. That allows a huge benefit from a psychological perspective, which, as you know, I've been and have always been big on psychological trading. I view trading as more of a psychological warfare than anything else. So that mentality hasn't changed at all. It's just the approach that I'm utilizing to find those areas has been much more refined because of this influx in volume. You can tell the story way easier now, in my opinion. I say easier. I know it's not easy, but that's the only word that I can really think of to describe what I mean by it. It just comes more naturally than it did before because the volume makes more sense. You don't have to make as many assumptions because the whales, I mean, they make it really obvious, even if they try not to these days. So as far as like the approach or the mentality behind my trading, I don't think it's changed at all. Very much on the psychological side of things. But the locations and the zones and everything else, in terms of taking initial risk on entries, has gone to almost either none, or if I'm building in, usually takes a ton. So it's either none or a ton. There's not really much in the middle, is there? So, I mean, it really, really refines the story. Helps a lot. But again, for me, it helped a lot because that's just my style of trading. I love psychological trading. That's always been my approach. So the fact that it refined that specific niche really helped me as an individual, you know. I'll take what I can get. Hey. For training, can you? Yeah, so let's move into the training for VIPs. So let's end the YouTube side of things. For those of you who are still hanging in there on the YouTube side of things, I appreciate you all. Thank you for sticking around. As per the usual, you'll be able to watch it back as soon as I end it. You can hit rewind whenever you want. But it was a pretty solid day, all things considered. The S&P with a little bit of a herky-jerk surprise move there, but hey, I'll take it. Otherwise, that'll do it. For you VIPs, stick around in the Zoom room. I'm going to close the YouTube side of things and we'll go into training. So a few questions we have to take care of with the internal stuff. So we'll get that all taken care of there. For the YouTube side, enjoy, rest up. I hope you had a great day of trading and we will see you all tomorrow, right? All right. Have a good one. We'll talk to y'all later.